The first portion will be the public meetings, and I will call up the applicant. And after the applicant speaks, anyone wishing to speak will be given the opportunity. There is no debate on any of the items in the public meetings. The second part of tonight's meeting, I will call up the delegations. Each person will be allowed 5 minutes to speak, unless they are representing 3 or more individuals in the audience. Then they will be allowed 15 minutes to speak. Planning and Development Committee will consider all oral and written comments prior to making a decision on a planning application. I will call upon staff to provide their presentations, and committee will be able to ask questions after staff's presentation. Once staff has presented, I will call upon the consultant to present. Once the consultant has presented, committee will be able to ask questions again. To the committee, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, then we will proceed forward with public meeting A, which is on 2225 Eagle Street North. The presenter for this evening is Deanne Fries, our Manager of Planning and Development. Welcome, Deanne.
Thank you. Okay, good evening. My name is Deanne Fries. I'm the Manager of Development Planning. I'm here to present the public meeting presentation for 2225 Eagle Street North, and that's application R0518. Notice of this meeting was given in accordance with the Planning Act, and there is a registry available in the lobby if anyone wants to sign it for future notification of the proposal. The subject property is located on the south side of Eagle Street North, west of Industrial Road. The current zoning on the property limits the zoning to only allowing retail sales of carpet and flooring. The applicant is proposing to expand the retail so that it also includes office, service commercial, and other types of commercial uses that are beyond just the sale of carpet and flooring. No additions or site alterations are proposed to the building or the site at this time. The site-specific zoning that is proposed would also permit service commercial establishments, retail commercial establishments, business and professional offices, and food services establishments. This is a photo of the property as it appears today. And this is a draft site plan which shows that there is a paved parking area at the front of the building and room for additional parking at the rear. Considerations in approving this and providing a recommendation for Planning and Development Committee would be the appropriateness of the commercial uses proposed and the parking available. Recommendation is for staff to report back with a subsequent report and recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. To the committee, are there any questions? Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Deanne. Is there any request by the applicant for a residential unit in there?
No.
Thank
not
you.
At this time.
I'm seeing no further questions. I thank you for your presentation. And now it is, oh no, I have the consultant, Victor Labreche, here to speak to this. Is Victor here this evening? I see not. Well, then it's time for the public. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to this planning? Please come forward and give us your name and address.
My name is Tim Kerber. I'm the owner of 2225 Eagle Street North. I currently reside at 220 Queen Street East in Cambridge. I just want to try and put this through as quickly as possible. I'm not sure of the procedures because it's been a long time since I've done this. I just want to change it from, like I said, C4 site specific to just a standard C4.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions you wish to ask the owner? Seeing none, I see that Victor has come in. Victor, we moved a little faster than you thought we would. So
Thank
welcome,
you.
Victor.
While I catch my breath. Thank you, Chair Reid, members of committee, Mayor Craig, and members of staff. Sorry, I just encountered, sort of stuck behind an accident. Nobody hurt, but kind of rushing and late to get here. I think as previous speaker noted, our clients are have I guess an offer on the property that's active right now to lease it, and they wish to move in as quick as possible. So if I just catch my breath. So we would ask if this could be brought back to the next available council meeting. Appreciate that there's an election upon us, but if that could be brought to November 6th, that would be much appreciated. I think the zone change is a fairly straightforward matter on this one.
Thank you. We've heard your request, and we will do our best to accommodate it.
Thank you.
Perhaps there may be questions. Are there any questions that committee has? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Then I think, is there anyone else in the public who would wish to speak to this? Seeing none, I think we're ready for the motion. Councillor Devine, I believe you have it.
Motion seconded by Councillor Liggett. Public meeting 225 Eagle Street North zoning bylaw amendment. Ward 1, recommendation that the committee recommend to City Council. Public meeting report zoning bylaw amendment 225 Eagle Street be referred back to staff for a subsequent report and recommendation.
Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? The motion is carried unanimously.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was a motion.
I declare public meeting A closed. We will move to public meeting B on backyard hens. Our presenter will be Deanne Fries, our Manager of Planning and Development. Welcome back, Deanne.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of Planning and Development Committee. This is a public meeting for the zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendments to allow backyard hens. The purpose of the meeting is to formally introduce the city-initiated planning applications for zoning bylaw amendment, official plan amendments to the Planning and Development Committee. Notice was sent out as per the Planning Act requirements, and a registry is available in the lobby for anyone who wishes to receive further notification. As background for this particular topic, there was an initial survey that was conducted in 2016 with 146 respondents. Based on that survey, 74% of the participants were in favor of allowing backyard hens. The city conducted a review of the zoning bylaw and an animal control bylaw at that time, and public information meetings were held in February of 2018 to present 3 options. Also, in addition to those public information meetings, there was also another online survey that was available in March of 2018, and there was 218 respondents to that survey. The three options that were presented was the first option, status quo, which would permit only hens in rural and agricultural areas. The second option was to permit backyard hens with regulations. And the third option was to permit backyard hens with regulations, a registry, and a one-time inspection fee. So based on those survey results, the city is now initiating a formal public meeting to consider the zoning bylaw amendments and official plan amendment. The city conducted a comparison with other adjacent municipalities or some adjacent municipalities with whether or not they permitted backyard hens. The City of Waterloo did not permit them, but they did allow grandfathering of existing residents that had hens. Kitchener did allow them. Guelph allows them, but with a minimum setback of 15 meters to adjacent buildings. North Dumfries approved now. They're currently in the process of allowing backyard hens, and they have approved in principle. County of Brant, Woolwich, and Norfolk did not allow. Quinte West allowed it, but with a minimum lot size of 1 acre. Niagara Falls and Kingston allowed, and London and Peterborough did not. So based on the public feedback that we received through the February public information sessions, the online survey, and public submissions, there was a number of benefits that were identified. The number one benefit that was identified was that people would be allowed to produce their own eggs, which were better tasting eggs. There was also a number of concerns that were identified through the public consultation and through the comments that were received online. The top concerns were rodents, which would be attracted to the chickens, the feed, and the eggs. Potential for wild predators attracted to the chickens, the feed, and the eggs as well. And public health issues associated with diseases and spread to humans, pets, or the hens from the eggs. So because this is a city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment, we have prepared a draft zoning bylaw, which is included in the report. The draft zoning would include a definition of backyard hens, which would limit to only female hens and in the rear yard of residentially zoned properties. Additional regulations for property would include regulations for the coop to be permitted in the rear yard and set back 3 meters from property lines. Requirements for the property to be fenced, a minimum lot area of 500 square meters, and it would be permitted in single, detached, and semi-detached residential zones. Additional regulations would need to be included in the animal control bylaw. Some of these draft regulations that the city is looking at would permit a maximum number of hens, no roosters, no sale of eggs or other products, no home slaughter. The hens must be contained in the rear yard. The owner of the hens would have to reside on the property. They would not be allowed to have any nuisance. And there was also detailed regulations for the coops and the care and maintenance of the hens. Considerations that planning staff are looking at for initiating these zoning bylaw and the official plan amendments would be the benefits and then concerns raised by public and councillors, comments that have been received from public and councillors, and the financial implications of enforcement. Staff recommends at this time that we report back with a subsequent report and recommendation. Thank you.
I see we have some questions. Councillor Liggett.
Through you, Madam Chair, Dan, when I look at the only one, if I were to vote for this, would be option 3. When I look at this, there's a discussion about enforcement and bylaw officers. When I see that we struggle now with the staff that we have to do with bylaw enforcement, there's such a wait time and a lot of upset people in the community. We'd have to hire more people in bylaw, I would think, if we follow through with this, and in particular option 3, would we not?
Yes, potentially if council was going to proceed with this amendment, we would have to do an analysis of what it would cost to enforce, to monitor the hens, to a permitting process, either to do it in-house or to contract to animal control bylaw. We'd have to come up with specific costs.
Okay, could I have another question, please, Madam Chair?
Certainly.
A couple of other things that I note don't seem to be in the chart of what we would do is, one, there's no plan for the disposal of the manure. There's discussion of it in the report, but there's no actual requirement of a plan by the property owner. There's one other thing we had. Sorry, if somebody else wants to ask a question, I'll come back to that.
Okay, we'll move ahead then. Councillor Wolf?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report. In Kitchener, which they've recently done this, do you know how many residents have chosen to have backyard chicken coops or chickens?
I don't know, but I know the manager of bylaw enforcement does know the numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of council, staff. I believe they've had 70 coops within the city, and so far, I think they implemented it 2 years ago, they've had just 2 complaints. From what I understand in Kitchener, through their director, anybody that's sort of taking this on thus far is very, very serious about it, has really spent a lot of time and money into the coops and so forth. Those were the comments I received from Kitchener. It's not, in their opinion, a cost-saving endeavor, like it costs money to do this, but most people are doing it to kind of come back to a holistic approach to food, and that seems to be the common theme.
Okay, thank you. So if we implemented it, and considering Kitchener has almost twice as many people as we do, we would maybe have 35 coops.
Potentially.
And 1 complaint, which would most probably not tie up a bylaw officer that much. Okay. And if we brought this back, would we, when do you anticipate bringing this back to council?
I'm hoping we can bring it back in the winter.
Winter? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just with a comment to your other question about the bylaw enforcement staff. Staff will do a review of all the different options and the preferred option. I guess it would depend on what option we went with, whether or not we went with a permit process with a one-time inspection or just the regulations as well for staff time.
Thank you. Now we'll move on. Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My other question had to do with the downtime. I don't see that in the staff's report. I only see it in the gentleman who wrote the top 10 hen chores on page 36 and number 10. He talks about the contamination and health of the animals, and there should be a downtime for the death of viruses, that sort of thing. It's sort of like when you plant a crop, you can't continue doing the same crop forever. So that I don't see addressed in this staff report. So
yes, any specific regulations like that would be part of the animal control bylaw regulations, but that's something that we could consider adding to the draft regulations as well.
okay, thank you.
Councillor Devine.
Yes, thank you, the Chair. Thank you for the report. I don't see a provision in there where if you choose to have hens, laying hens, that prior to that you would get an agreement from the neighbors that they're okay with it?
Yeah, we did not include the option at this time to have neighbor participation or neighbor approval in the allowing of backyard hens, but it is something that we can consider as one of the options.
I would like the staff to have a look at that, because I'm quite afraid that we could get into a situation where all of a sudden somebody gets their 4 backyard hens, and all of a sudden we're kind of pit neighbor against neighbor, whether it's the smell or the noise or whatever excuse is used.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll look at that in the final report.
Thank you.
I have no further questions, so I thank you for your presentation. Now it is time for the public who wishes to weigh in on this. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Yes, please come forward and give us your name and address.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Young, and I live at 74 Far Crescent in Cambridge, which is the Hespeler part. I'm one of the ones that have come to the meetings because I am one that would like to have probably not 4 hens in my backyard, but a couple. I come from a farming background, so I have knowledge about hens. And we're not going to have 2,000 hens in our backyard. We have up to 4. So I'd just like to make my comments to some of the comments that were asked of the city staff. The manure question. Intensive chicken farming that we drive by when you go out in the country has a smell, but you have to realize those are probably 1,000 to 4,000 broilers in that building. So the 4 chickens, if you have 4, most of us will probably be gardeners, so that manure would go back into our compost bins ourselves, back into our own garden as natural fertilizer, and we do have a green bin program in our city, so it would be no different than if you had a rabbit, a gerbil, other animals, cats. That waste goes into the green bin, back into the compost of in the region. The health of chickens, the feed that you buy for your chickens has medication. So chickens, unless you're going to abuse them, and I don't think that many of us who are going to do this are in it to abuse these animals. We're doing it to teach grandchildren about hens, where eggs come from. I guess bringing back memories of my childhood is one of my reasons. So those looking after them will look after them well. And if they have a sick hen, then I'm sure the local vet or University of Guelph, who is world known for our animal husbandry, would be a resource that people would find of help. And the disposal, somebody asked about a dead animal. I think it would be similar to when your pet rabbit died, your pet gerbil died. You do it maybe through the local vet. It may be part of the bylaws of how you dispose of that chicken. And most of us who are having this in our backyard are not going to cut their heads off and cook them for supper. They will become our pets. And again, I was at the meetings where they listed the different cities and how many had hens, and we aren't nearly as big as Kitchener, so I suspect the 30 is probably high, and then even if we had 30, some of those will decide, nope, not going to do this. So we could be possibly looking for under 20 people or 20 homes that would be having this in the end. So thank you. I appreciate your time and letting me give my comments.
Please stay there for a minute, because there may be a question.
Yes.
Okay. The committee, do you have any questions for? No, they have no questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, then I guess we're ready for the motion. Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Pam Wolf, Public Meeting B. And the recommendation that the committee recommend to City Council that Report 18-085 CD, Republic Meeting Report, City of Cambridge initiated backyard hen zoning bylaw and official plan amendments be referred back to staff for a subsequent report and recommendation.
Thank you. We have some comments. Councillor Liggett.
Through you, Madam Chair. Until today, I was fully in support of this entire project. I have been since it was first brought to Councillor Wolf and myself, I think maybe 2 years ago, something like that. And I haven't strayed from that. But today, I rethought the whole thing, and I am really struggling with one particular part of the information that was brought to our attention. And before I get to that, I just want to address the manure thing again. You're actually not supposed to be putting chicken manure in composting. because it does affect the breakdown of the material, so it's not supposed to be kept in the compost heap. But the part that's bothering me, and I have watched all the television programs of what happens in the hatcheries where they take the male chicks and they throw them into the grinder live, and all the other horrible things like bashing their heads and that, you know, when they're little tiny chicks. And I started to think about how we would be, by doing this, we're enabling more hatcheries to come into being. The more backyard hens that are out there, the more chicks that are going to, we're creating a market is what we're doing. And I have a problem with that. You know, when we as human beings you know, cry out about what happens in, you think of this as a leap maybe, but I don't think it is a leap. If we think humans are valuable, we should also think that animals are valuable. So if there's a hue and cry about what happens to female babies in some of the countries, I think we're sort of doing the same thing here, but only at the level of animals. And I struggle with the fact that I would make a decision that would cause cruelty and death, deliberate cruelty and death to an animal. And I've seen a couple of comments here by the public about how the male chicken is the most cruelly treated sex of the most cruelly treated species on Earth. And I think that may be true, aside from what we do to swine, the way they're taken and shipped and that sort of thing. And when chicks are shipped through the mail, and I'm really struggling with that part. And it's not that I don't think that they would be a good thing in some backyards. I don't think that there's an equal value to what would happen to those chicks if they're males. And so for that reason, I am not going to support moving this forward any further than it has already gone.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Madam Chair. As Councillor Leggett said, we were approached at least 2 years ago, by a woman who wanted to have backyard chickens. And all the people that I've met who've wanted these backyard chickens have wanted them for good reasons. They want them to treat chickens well, to teach their children how to look after animals, and for them to understand where our food and eggs come from. I understand your Councillor Leggett's point, but to me that point is basically we should become vegans, vegetarians, if we don't want any abuse of chickens or male chickens, etc. And I think when we look at the number of chicks that we're talking, if it's 4 per household and 25 different families take this up, we're talking 100, and they would be in a home for a few years at least. So I think this is a very small problem, and we're not promoting it. People eat more chicken than they eat any other meat, I understand. And I know there's definitely arguments to be made about animal cruelty on all levels. 2 out of my 3 children are vegans, so I'm very aware of the animal rights arguments. However, to apply it in this case, I think is really going too far. We're talking basically 100 chicks, and who would be hopefully looked after by people who really care for their animals. And if they're not being well cared for, we do have a complaint procedure, bylaw officers, etc. But as we already heard from staff in Kitchener, they've only had 2 complaints, 70 different people operating the coops, and it hasn't been been a problem. So I will be voting in favor of the motion, because this isn't saying we're going to have the backyard chickens. It's saying we're going to further investigate this, look at an appropriate bylaw and appropriate regulations. So this is just moving it one step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I need to remind Council that this is not the time to debate, and we've gotten into debating. This is the time for questions, and questions only, because this will come back to us. There's no final decision being made here tonight. This is just to raise your concerns and to let staff know what they are, so when they do look at this issue and come back to us with something, those concerns have been dealt with. I do have a list of speakers, and so I'm very hopeful that everyone will be asking questions. Councillor Montero.
Thank you, and don't make an example out of me, because I have concerns. It's not particularly a question, but I'm going to approach this in a different way, as has already been said. My concern is, and I was brought up with chickens in the backyard, they attract, my concern is attracting rodents. And people already, I have emails that we have a problem with mice, not so much the mice, but the rats in their backyards. We had a problem with coyotes coming into town. Well, coyotes like chickens, and foxes, and so on and so forth. My concern is attracting wild animals to come in further into town, because they can smell it, and the feed, if it's not for the chicks, for the feed. And when I talk about rodents, there's rats. We have to feed them, and rats have a way of getting in. They get into my garage, let alone a chicken coop. So those are my concerns, but I'm going to keep an open mind. I want to hear more about it and what staff is going to come up with. I'm also concerned about with turning neighbor against neighbor. That is a concern. And the smell. And the smell, they do smell. And hot days like we just experienced in the last couple of months, they do smell. So if you're not out there every day, every other day, hosing it down, yeah, you're going to get smell. But as I said, I'm going to keep an open mind. I want to hear more about it and see when it comes to make a decision what I will do.
Thank you, Councillor Montero. Now, Councillor Mehta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, we have heard a lot of the benefits of this initiative, but I think we need to take an extremely cautious approach. I think a lot of the concerns have already been raised, like what Councillor Leggett had to say. I never actually thought about that until I heard about that from her, so I think that needs to be part of the review. Councillor Montero also mentioned a lot about the rodents, and I've had a lot of calls in my ward about that actually, and about rats going around the neighborhood as well, not just around the auto wrecking site, but as far as Town Line Road. And I think that we really need to be careful here what we're doing. I'm not saying we can't do it, there might be a way around it, but I think these concerns need to be looked at. And then just the whole thing, like, do we have enough staff for enforcement and to handle any concerns that might come up? And also the whole idea of having a snitch culture, or the risk that we run into doing that. I want to be mindful of that we don't pit neighbor against neighbor. So those are the concerns, and I'm looking forward to hearing staff's response to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Leggett.
Through you, Madam Chair. To staff, I think we've all heard of the complaints about rats in the community. I had a couple again this week, and I think we all probably believe that it may be coming because of the lack of garbage pickup that the region has started to do. And I'm have concerns about the unintended consequences of what we are doing here, you know, the repercussions of our actions. So I'd like to know if staff could give us an idea of how many complaints about rats that we have gotten in the past 12 months.
I'm looking to see if there's anyone who can respond to that. Deanne?
I certainly can't respond to the number of complaints. I'm thinking it's something that we can look up. We can look on our system, and we can provide you a response. I can't respond at this time, unless Dennis knows something.
So that will be a part of the process.
That would be good, because I just heard from somebody the other day where they caught 17 rats.
Yeah. So
in one day.
I think that all of our concerns have been expressed at this point in time, so I'm looking for a motion. Councillor Mann?
We've done the motion already.
Oh, we did the motion already. Sorry about that. And then we got into debate. Okay, so you heard the motion. It's just to go forward to staff for a report that will come back to us. Those in favor of the motion? Those opposed? The motion is carried. I now declare public meeting B closed. We will move to public meeting C, 990 Dundas Street South. Once again, our presenter will be Deanne Fries, our Manager of Planning and Development. Welcome, Deanne.
Thank you. This is a public meeting for 990 Dundas Street South. It's planning application RO618. The purpose of this meeting is to formally introduce the planning applications to the Planning and Development Committee. Notice was provided in accordance with the Planning Act, and there's a registry available in the lobby if anyone wants to receive further information. The location of the property is on the south side of Dundas Street South, west of Branston Road and east of Champlain Boulevard. The applicant is requesting a site-specific zoning amendment to rezone the southern portion of the lands from single detached residential to open space. This application went through a Committee of Adjustment application for a severance to create 2 additional residential lots, and through that severance, a condition was imposed to rezone the rear portion of the property. So this image shows the 3 new residential lots. Formerly, it was 1 residential lot, and the rear portion of the site is the portion to be rezoned to open space. Considerations that would be looked at by staff for a recommendation would be the land use compatibility with the surrounding existing development, the city's official plan policies regarding environmental features, environmental considerations, and comments received from the public. Staff recommendation is to report back with a subsequent report and recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanne. And now to the committee. Are there questions? Councillor Liggett.
Through you, Madam Chair. Dan, I understand there were some concerns with regard to the trees along the boundary line, and have they've been addressed in the environmental impact statement?
Yeah, the city will review the full environmental impact statement. This zoning amendment will actually make the existing situation better. Right now, it's all single detached residential, and through this rezoning, the rear portion will be open space to protect that property.
Okay, because I had a concern from a resident with regards to that, to make sure that that is taken care of, so thank you.
Any
Thanks.
tree removals would be subject to the tree cutting bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
I see no further questions, so Councillor Montero, you have the motion.
I do, Madam Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Herrera. Public meeting report 990 Dundas Street South zoning bylaw amendment. Ward 7. Can I speak to it?
Certainly.
Make a couple of comments. That happens to be in Ward 7. I know the area well, and there was, just to address the concern of the trees in the back, there was one residence there about 6 months, 8 months ago that someone went in and cut some trees down, and the neighbors got all together. But it turned out we never did find out who cut the tree. We think somebody did it on purpose just to get back at someone. So, but the way this reads, that portion of it's to be kept as green space, so they monitor that quite closely, the neighbors there. So I have no concern, and I think I'm all for the splitting the lot for 3 when it comes back. Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot to ask the public, is there anyone here who wishes to speak to this before we vote on this motion? Seeing none, then we can go ahead with the motion. Those in favor? Those opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. I now declare public meeting C closed. We'll move to item 8, 195 Hespeler Road. And Elaine Runshaw, city planner, will make a presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee, staff, and the public. Tonight we're presenting a recommendation report for 195 Hespeler Road. This is redevelopment of the existing satellite motel, and if this development is approved, the motel will be replaced with a residential development. Pardon me. So the proposal is to construct 2 apartment buildings on the property. Here's a copy of the concept plan, and I have, through the assistance of the consultant for the applicant, been able to provide you with an updated copy of that concept plan with some dimensions showing the location of the building A, which is on the left side of the screen or left side of the drawing that you have in front of you this evening. That building is proposed for 56 units. One of the units will be used for an office, and 55 will be used for residential. 33 of those units will be for affordable housing. And that building is proposed to be set back at its closest point about 0.9 meters or close to 3 feet from the property line, but there will be a landscape strip in front of that as well. And there was a question about the setback on the southern part of the frontage of the building closest to Hespeler Road, and that would be about 1.7 meters in addition to the landscape strip, which would be about 5.5 feet. Setback. So there are some site-specific regulations that are proposed for this development to deal with building A. Again, add an office as a permitted use. Reduce the amenity area. That's the space that's available for residents of the units to have some quiet time. And so the bylaw requires certain standards for amenity area, and there's proposed reduction to 15 square meters. Then between building A and B, there's proposed to be 1 loading space, and that is a reduction of what is normally required in the zoning bylaw. Building B is proposed to be 8 stories in height for a total of 73 market rate rental units. There's also a proposed reduced minimum landscape space down to 29%, a short, small reduction from what the zoning bylaw requires, and at the north side of the property to reduce the interior side yard, and also to reduce the amenity area as noted on the slide. There is a proposed parking reduction of 17 spaces for the affordable housing component of the development. The market rate units will have full parking as per the zoning bylaw requirements. And there is a proposed front yard setback reduction of 0.9 meters and a landscape strip of 0.9 meters. We received a number of comments about this application, and we've included recognition of those comments starting on page 219 in the agenda. Rather than go through all the information, a few items that I wanted to touch on is the reduction in parking, and the applicant has provided a parking justification report to indicate what their experience is with affordable housing, parking needs, and other projects. And that information has been reviewed by city staff and is supported by city staff. In terms of fencing, there was a request by neighbours to increase the height, and as noted here, the proposed height for the development has been increased to 1.8 metres, or about 5 feet, just 5 foot 11 inches, just a little bit below 6 feet. And the intensification of the site, this area was previously redesignated to allow higher density mixed-use development, so this concept is in line with that. And the building design location close to Hespeler Road, that is part of the whole concept of redevelopment of Hespeler Road. Rather than put a sea of parking in front of buildings, the idea is to bring buildings closer to Hespeler Road and create a nice interface with the sidewalk area where people are walking along Hespeler Road. And also balconies, concern about overlook. As part of this development, it is considered to be desirable to have balconies associated with the units, and staff are supportive of that. So the recommendation is to have the application approved. If this application is approved, there will be a companion site plan application required where more details regarding landscaping, the actual fence construction, and other matters will also be looked at. So, Madam Chair, I'm available to answer questions. Thank you.
We do have questions. Councillor Montero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Elaine, the building that we just been completed, well, not even a year ago, or 6 months ago, across from the police station.
Yes.
The setback compared to these two that we're talking about today, is it similar, so people at least can get a visual at what the setback is?
It is, I think, a little bit closer than 175 Hespeler Road, but it is comparable from a visual perspective.
The difference is in...
I can't cite the specific difference, but it is quite close.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mehta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Thanks, Elaine, for the presentation. When it comes to the buffer strip on the south side behind the residence of Munch Avenue, do we know at this point what kind of landscaping they're looking at? Like, would the applicant be open to planting spruce trees for privacy?
That'll be looked at as part of the site plan application, and we are aware of the request for screening, so that will definitely be factored in by staff. And so conifers will be part of that planting plan.
Thank you. Councillor Liggett.
Through you, Madam Chair. Elaine, when I look at the responses to the reduced number of parking spots, it says that there's no visitor parking, dedicated visitor parking for the affordable units. And that's the part that I said last time I have a problem with, because the residents may not have cars, but their visitors most certainly will likely have cars. So what type of assurances, or the people who are paying market rent, what sort of guarantee do you know if they're going to have that their visitors will have a space and they won't be used by the visitors of the affordable housing units?
I would like the consultant who is prepared to speak after to address that issue, okay. But it can be addressed through the management arrangements for use of the property. Tenants would be advised of that when they rent space, and there could also be signage installed on the property.
Okay, thanks.
Did you want the consultant to speak to that now?
No, the consultant is going to delegate shortly afterwards. Thank you.
We'll go ahead then. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Elaine. I think my first question was asked by Councillor Mehta, and I'll wait for the consultant on the parking issue. Thanks.
Okay, I have no further questions, but I do have delegations who wish to come forward. The first delegation is Steve Hulicki. Welcome, Mr. Hulicki.
Good evening, Council and Planning Department. My name is Steve Hulicki, and I live at 5 Munch Avenue, directly adjacent to the site of the subject application. I have reviewed the report from the Planning Department authored by Valerie Spring and made several observations about some severe shortcomings. Under the heading of financial implications, sources of funding are presented, but there's not $1 amount disclosed. Nowhere in the report is the financial cost to the taxpayer revealed. Does the Planning Department have those numbers? If so, then why were they not revealed? And if they don't have them, how can they possibly recommend approving this project? This is an excellent example of lack of transparency. Decision recommendations to move forward without disclosing the magnitude of the financial cost to the taxpayer. This alone should be reason enough to send the report back to the Planning Department for revision. Then there is the issue of fencing to provide separation of the subject project site from adjoining residential properties. Some positive movement made from the original design by the applicant by increasing the height from 1.5 meters to 1.8 meters, but no mention is made of the type of construction that will be used. The prefabricated concrete type used along expressways to shield residential neighborhoods for reasons of health and safety need to be considered. But for the report not to address the type of fence is another reason to have the report sent back to the Planning Department for revision. The staff response to the issue of fencing are, and I quote, "The applicant believes and staff concurs that a 2.1 meter would look like a barrier. They are missing the entire point. It is meant to be a barrier. There are several site-specific amendments being proposed here. Council can approve site-specific fence bylaw for the site and need to seriously consider the addition." On page 10 of the report under detailed planning analysis, and I quote, policy 1.1.1 of the 2014 PPS seeks to create, quote, healthy, livable, and safe communities. Please note the word safe. This is another reason why Council needs to seriously consider the importance of an effective separation wall. And then there's the issue of contradictory statements with regards to visitor parking for the affordable housing units. In several spots, it is made very clear that there will be no visitor parking spaces provided. Yet on page 19 of the staff response, it is, and I quote, "The 24 spaces allocated to the affordable units will accommodate both tenants and their visitors." So which is it? No allocation for visitors, or visitors may use spaces allocated to tenants of affordable units? Will signage be posted advising visitors of such allocation? Again, this needs to be clarified when the report is sent back to planning for other changes. And by the way, discriminating against anyone for housing-related services is a violation of the Ontario Human Rights Code. On the issue of compensation for the adjacent property owners who will suffer property value loss, I understand staff's comment that it is beyond the scope of this report, but I would like Council to consider initiating the preparation of a sub-report for this project addressing that issue. Those citizens have been faithfully paying their property taxes for years and deserve to have their very real fears addressed. Many are retired seniors, and these homes represent the largest portion of their retirement nest egg. Pardon me. On page 25, and I quote, "The decrease in required setback will create a comfortable and safe pedestrian environment along Hespeler Road and may encourage an increase in active transportation." Where is the evidence or study to support this statement, or is it pardon me, one more minute? Planning evidence cannot be supported by any meaningful evidence. If there is no supporting material for this statement, then it should be deleted in the next revision. In the detailed planning analysis of there is a statement, policy 4.2 by 10, addresses the issue of climate change, requires municipalities to develop policies in their official plans to identify actions that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and address climate change. 2 points here. Because of their height, the two proposed buildings will be constructed using concrete as their principal component. Concrete is made of cement, whose production is the largest single CO2. Three sentences left or whatever?
Please go ahead.
Pardon me? Okay. Concrete is made with cement, whose production is the single largest CO2 producing industrial activity outside of power generation. There is a ton of CO2 produced for every ton of limestone burned in the production, excluding the CO2 generated from production of heat necessary for the process. If we were truly an environmentally considerate citizenry, then the roofs of the proposed buildings would be equipped with solar panels and not patios. This needs to be considered in light of the above referenced policy statement. Otherwise, the city is merely paying lip service to the policy. I'm asking Council to please send this report back to the Planning Department for the necessary revisions. Thank you.
Please state that there may be questions. Yeah, well, there definitely are questions, Mr. Halicki. Councillor Amata.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, thanks, Steve, for coming in. My question has to do with your comments regarding the Ontario human rights. Could you elaborate on that? Is it the part to do with the parking, like you were saying?
Yes.
In your opinion, what is the violation?
Well, it's very clear. I examined the Human Rights Code on their website, and the problem here is that this particular location is mixed. It has market units and subsidized or unaffordable units. And if you're providing services to one group and not the other, that is discrimination. And the important fact here is the fact that public money is being used on this project makes it an issue of discrimination. You cannot not deny the affordable housing folks the right to have visitor parking when other people that live in the same complex will have visitor parking. That's made quite clear in the literature.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Steve, we've waived parking requirements for other affordable housing projects, such as Hartwood Place here on Ainslie Street, and the other project on Hesper Road. So, did we, in your opinion, did we violate the human rights?
Well, no, you didn't.
And why not?
Well, no, because those are exclusively used for subsidized housing or affordable housing. So nobody was being discriminated against. But this project is unique because it's a mix of market housing and affordable housing. And to deny one group, you know, a accommodation-related facility, that amounts to discrimination.
Okay. Are you satisfied? Okay. We're moving on then. Councillor Liggett.
Through you, Madam Chair. Steve, thanks for coming before us again. And last time it was about the fence, and I think we've fixed the height of the fence for you. Maybe not the materials, but the height. This time you talked about the financial implications, the grants and the financial incentives, the funding and the financial incentives being given to this project. It's not the whole project, right? It's only 26% of the project, which is for the low-income part of
Yes, I understand
project.
that.
So
yes.
I'm really trying to figure out what you mean by that, because it seems like you think there should be a limit on the amount of money that's provided for those not able to afford market rent. And I'm wondering how, okay, you know, but that's the way it came across. So maybe you can address that, because, you know, when we have so many people who are homeless, and I just heard the figures the other day that it's more like 200 to 250 in the area. So, you know, we can't have people continue to live in tents or couch surfing. So we have to provide places for them to live wherever we can. So how do you balance that and not want to give financial incentives?
Please let me explain.
Sure.
No, that was not the point of my argument. What I'm asking for is for the planning document to reveal exactly how much funding is going into the project for this portion. In other words, there's funding coming from the federal government, the provincial government, Waterloo Region, and I guess there will be some from Cambridge too. But nowhere does it say how much this is actually going to cost the taxpayer. These are quantifiable numbers. And I want to know, why is it not revealed in the planning document?
Madam Chair, can I ask another question on that
Yes, you
same
may.
topic before staff may want to respond to that? So that goes back to the question that I did ask, was you feel there should be a limit put on financial
No.
incentives? So why would
No.
you need to know what that dollar value is? It's a serious question.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
not-
Oh, for transparency.
Just for transparency?
Transparency,
Okay, so
yes.
maybe staff is able to provide that tonight, I don't know.
Through you, Madam Chair, we would have to provide follow-up information. I'd like to consult the figures and then provide follow-up to committee. Thank you. But we can do that in time for council. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Mayor Craig.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. And I'm just going to quote this here. It says, on page 10 of the report under detailed planning analysis, and I quote policy 1.1.1, of the 2014 PPS seeks to create healthy, livable, and safe communities. Please note the word safe. This is another reason why Council needs to seriously consider the importance of an effective separation wall. What do you mean by that?
The housing unit itself, okay, is going to have increased visitations by, okay, of course, police services. There is going to be, for example, I spoke to one former resident of the affordable housing unit that's down on Ainslie Street by the bus terminal, and they said it was not unusual for people to have, for the police to be on the site, say, 3 times in a day. Now, there was another letter that was submitted to council for the last meeting, which was part of the report. And it was from a Mr. McGaughy who lived on Main Street and had personal experiences with living next to or amongst, it was like, I think he had a condo unit in a complex on Main Street and suffered loss of property value, and talked about the problems they had with safety and security. And that's one of the concerns that I have, is that there should be an adequate separation so that the people that are living in, single detached homes adjacent to the property are not going to feel threatened by the fact of the high density of folks next door. They're actually, one of the neighbors, 3 or 4 houses down, has already had problems with people. This was just some spillover from the Satellite Motel. But people trying to, sort of like put a tent up in the backyard, that kind of thing. It's a very real concern that, like I say, the people along there are seniors, they're retirees.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. So
Anyone
thank you,
else?
Mr. Hillicky.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, now I would call Jacoba Wilbur. Welcome, Ms. Wilbur.
Hello, my name is Jacoba Wilbur, and I live at 5 Munch. For the record, the previous council meeting regarding 195 Hespeler was on July 3rd, not the 10th, the public meeting, as referenced several times in the Planning Committee report. You can look at the Rogers video. Thank you. Minimum front yard of Building A of less than 3 feet. This is less than 3 feet. So you've got your front window by the sidewalk where people are going to look in. You can't even open up your curtains. This is encouraging voyeurism and invasion of privacy. The report doesn't say anything about the balconies. Are they going to be hanging over the sidewalks that are so close? There is no place for snow to move in the wintertime. The urban plan design shows that there's going to be some shrubbery there. How can shrubs be put into this space and look aesthetically presentable. It is mention is made of the road widening, but there is no description of how wide the road will be. The plan needs to expressly state which units will be affordable in Building A and how affordable parking spaces will be indicated without highlighting this fact, thus invading their privacy. Conscientiously planning to provide no visitor parking for affordable units is discriminatory and is in violation of the Human Rights Code that gives all people equal rights and opportunities without discrimination in specific areas such as housing and services. Planning department should consider more underground parking. And how is this visitor parking going to be enforced? And what happens if there's overflow visiting parking? There's no parking on Hesper Road. Are they going to park in Munch? Are they going to park at the flea market? And who gets the use of the underground parking? Nowhere in the report can I find reference for disabled parking. Under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, physically disabled persons need to be given priority for underground parking spots. Excuse me. There is no drawing of the underground parking. How can the Planning Committee guarantee that the tenants living here will be using jobs on the Hesper corridor, as opposed to Kitchener, Milton, Mississauga, which will require 2 vehicles? The report does not address an emergency evacuation plan, backup power system in the event of a power failure when elevators cannot be used, or even dedicated wheelchair-friendly units, which would be forward-thinking for those in need of affordable housing that have a physical disability and would truly address and set an example of the city's vision of a safe, trusting, and supportive environment. 26 Ainsley Street, I believe, has 4 wheelchair accessible units. At least this is what I've been told. Now, McGaughey sent a letter, and it was referenced by the previous person, and he says, I purchased a condo in the same block and lived through the end result of affordable housing. Devalued property values, a constant police presence.
Go ahead, you have 1 more minute.
Okay. Constant police presence for offenses ranging from drugs, robberies, assault, and murder. Also, the Skyline sent a letter in that was not read at the last time that says further density will negatively impact the existing resident and property values. The last meeting I requested a tax holiday, but apparently it's out of the scope of the study. Would Council please direct me to the person to whom I can address my concerns that were mirrored by 2 other people that I don't even know?
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Liggett.
Not so much a question for Ms. Wilbur, but a question to staff with regards to number 8 in her letter where it talks about no left turn from the southbound Hespeler Road onto Munch. Has staff looked at that, and if so, what have they come up with?
Madam Chair, again, if this application is approved, it will be subject to site plan review, and our transportation team would review the site plan in detail to look at that kind of matter. So it hasn't been determined at this point. Thank you.
Okay, and Ms. Wilbur, you understand that this is a totally different company than Lancer, totally different management team, and that they have a stellar reputation for managing their buildings and the residents. It's like apples and oranges when you're talking about the two buildings and
but you're not going to discriminate against the affordable housing, and you're going to provide disability parking for those that need it?
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your comments with regard to people who live in low-income housing and the type of crime that you were talking about.
I'm just quoting McGaughey.
Okay, well, he's not here, and you quoted him, so I'm just saying you understand that we're not even talking, it's like apples and oranges here when we talk about the management company and the developer. They're nowhere near the same level of people. Okay, thanks.
I have no further questions, so thank you for your presentation. Now the next delegation is Sarah Knoll from the GSP Group. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. So my name is Sarah Knoll, and I'm a planner with GSP Group. I am here with Mr. Mike Foley from New Horizon Homes, Mr. Steve Garrison from Housing Cambridge, Ms. Suzanne Swanton, and Mr. Tim Welch from Tim Welch Consulting, who can answer any questions you may have on the affordable housing or the construction side of this application. I appreciate all the work that the planning staff have done, Elaine and Valerie Spring, and I have read their supportive staff report and agree with their recommendation. So since the public meeting that was held here in July, the application has been revised. Specifically, we have pulled our official plan amendment application because your OPA 17 has been approved and is in force and effect. This now means that our application is in conformity with your Cambridge official plan, as the OP now provides policy direction for high density, up to 12 stories, mixed-use development along the Hespeler corridor, which this development supports. As the city does not have the zoning bylaw in conformity with their official plan, we do still require the zoning bylaw amendment in front of you. Once again, I do support staff's recommendation and can answer any questions that you may have. The one question about the visitor parking, I can say that it's based on a needs analysis, and the ratio was adjusted for zoning conformity. So the visitor parking spaces where we meet it for the market rate units, they're located on the surface, the at grade, and they can be shared with the affordable units as well. They're not going to be specifically delegated to market or affordable at the surface. And then speaking with the 0.7 ratio for the affordable units, that was analyzed by our Paradigm Transportation Solutions. So the consultant did the analysis based on some proxy sites, and Tim Welch can speak to how they are underutilizing their parking at some proxy sites and do have ample parking areas available for visitors for the affordable dwelling units. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have questions, starting with Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Chair. Me again. So that was my question about the visitor parking. So I'm wondering, you said no dedicated visitor parking. So, and then you say that the visitor parking that it would be allotted because of market rent, it's going to be shared with the visitor parking for the low-income housing. So to me, it's like there's a double argument that, like, it's, you know, it's not making sense to me. So why use the argument that there doesn't need to be dedicated visitor parking if you're already allowing for it with the parking that's supposed to be dedicated for market value apartments?
Right. So through you, Madam Chair, it's talking about what the site will be used as, and then what the zoning ratio has to be to conform to the zoning, to comply with the zoning bylaw that you're approving. So we had the market, the affordable rates analyzed, and the 0.7 was actually in excess of what they need on the proxy sites. We allocated visitor parking that we supply on the surface parking to the market rate in that ratio. That being said, that meets the zoning compliance for the regulation for parking. How those visitor parking spaces are utilized on site, if and when there's an influx of visitors for affordable housing or an influx of visitors for market rate, they won't be specified to be allocated for either or. They will be available for everyone to use. But as I said, the affordable parking analysis with regards to visitor spacing and the 0.7 is already in excess of what they use in other locations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Move on to Councillor Ameta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, if I remember correctly, is there going to be an office space component? And if so, where is that going to be located on the site?
Through you, Madam Chair, the office space component, there is one. So it's the in the Building A fronting Hespeler Road, and that site plan that Elaine passed out to you, it's the hatching that's at the front of the Building A along Hespeler. So it has its own entrance to animate the street towards facing Hespeler Road.
So the entire front, basically?
That's correct.
And a follow-up question, Madam Chair?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Both the landscape strip on the south side, is the applicant open to planting coniferous trees for privacy for the residents? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes. So we have begun work on our site plan application, and we have prepared a landscape plan. Currently, it does have the privacy fencing and plantings, and we would be amendable to having the screening as well.
Thank you. Councillor Ed Shade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Sarah, thanks for your presentation. I'm a little confused still about the visitor parking. And follow up to Councillor Leggett's question there. So how many total visitor parking spaces are going to be for both units in total?
So the parking we have, the ratio that we provided for zoning is 0.7 per affordable unit, not including visitor parking. The ratio that we've provided for the market is 1.25 units, or 1.25 parking spaces per unit. Now, each of those units for market will be offered with the one parking space with the unit. So in excess, there's the 0.25 per to be used as the visitors. So, grab my little calculator there. So we have 19 parking spaces that are dedicated as visitor parking spaces on the site.
For both units?
For both. So to conform to the zoning, it's allocated as the visitors for the market. But when it's on site and people are actively using it, it's open for visitors.
Okay, that seems awful small amount for my view of the total number of units there. Are you putting it on equal amounts on both sides, or where is this visitor parking going to be?
So through you, Madam Chair, to answer the first part of your comment about a small amount, there was council direction to reduce the number of parking for affordable housing, and that was justified through our parking justification report, and Tim Welch can speak to the reduction of the need for parking for the affordable housing. Currently on our site plan, we do have a division of the visitor parking spaces. The site plan in front of you has a little V on certain parking stalls. So there are some allocated along Hespeler Road and then some at the back of the site.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay.
Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think most of my questions in relation to parking have been answered, but I'm just going to make sure I have this correct. So we have, thank you, Sarah, for your presentation. We have 128 units at this location, and we have 19 visitor parking spots, and all 19 could hypothetically be used by affordable housing visitors coming to see people in affordable housing units.
So through you, Madam Chair, technically yes, but you have to understand that the 0.7 parking ratio that's allocated to the affordable housing is already in surplus. So there will be extra parking spaces for the affordable housing that, as Tim Welch mentioned at the last meeting, would be in surplus of parking, and there will be availability of the parking.
So if I can, just for clarification, Madam Chair, if there are 17 parking spots for affordable housing units then, and none of those were used, then you would have a total of 36 parking spots altogether for visitors. Hypothetically, if nobody in affordable housing had vehicles, all those 17 would be available. You would have 17 plus 19, and that would give you 36 parking spots for visitors, hypothetically.
I believe, so you would have the 33 affordable parking and then the 0.7, so that would be the 23 spaces for the affordable, plus the 17.
Thank you.
Councillor Liggett.
Through you, Madam Chair, again on the parking issue, you said you'd have a surplus, but you could only have a surplus if the people that rent the low income have no family and friends. So I would have to disagree with that comment. And you made a statement that it was council direction to reduce the visitor parking spots. I don't think that it was council direction. If anything, we would ask for more visitor parking spots. So where does that come from?
So through you, Madam Chair, it might be beneficial to have Tim Welch come up and speak to the actual proxy site that analyzes the parking. And the comment about the direction, and I don't know if Elaine, if you can direct me into the staff report section, but there was, I believe it's in the appendix, one moment. Did you want Tim to
well, why don't we have Mr. Walsh come up first while you're looking that up, and you can speak to the issues around parking?
Okay. Thank you very much. Tim Welch from Tim Welch Consulting. I think the comments that have been made by councillors in terms of parking with the affordable rents. So when we have looked at other affordable housing developments, the parking ratio actually used, and I think Councillor Mann was touching on this, has been around 0.25 in terms of actual usage. It's been between 0.25 and 0.3 at the Hartwood Place at Ainslie, at the 175 Hesper Road in terms of actual usage. So if that is carried forward at this building, you wouldn't have necessarily the full 23 spots, but you'd probably have another 14, 15 spaces that wouldn't be used by the 33 households living in, and they're all one-bedroom households for the affordable units, by the affordable units. So you're probably in the closer in the low 30s in terms of parking spaces actually available in terms of practical usage. I don't know if that helps.
We will see. I think that Elaine would wish to comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question that was raised about the council direction is found on page 218 of your agenda. It cites a resolution passed by Council February 2016, and that was in relation to the community improvement plan that Council passed and endorsed for affordable housing financial incentives. Thank you.
If I could speak to that to Elaine, or question that, if I remember right, though, that was part of the recommendation, but we at that meeting had talked about how little parking there really was. So I don't think we actually gave direction to reduce parking. I think we commented, if I remember right, on the lack of parking at that meeting. Am I correct in my memory?
Madam Chair, as further clarification, just that the resolution from 2016 was a general direction from Council in relation to affordable housing generally and financial incentives. Staff don't just automatically look at parking reduction. We've considered that this site is on the Hespeler Road corridor. There's a lot of access to transit. It's a walkable area as well. So those are all factors that are taken into consideration when we look at the applicant's parking proposal and the justification that they also provide for the recommended and requested parking reduction. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further questions, so I think we're ready for a motion. Councillor Liggett, you have the motion?
I do. Very happy to make this motion. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Devine. The recommendation as printed. And I just want to speak to that. before we vote, please?
Go ahead.
I'm very happy to have the second and third building, well, one building that's going to be affordable housing so close to the other one, and it falls into place with exactly where this type of a facility should be. I'd love to see more of this throughout the city. But I do want to make a note. We all struggle with every time we have some project come forward to do with parking, and even when it's affordable housing, you know, when it was spoken about that they wouldn't have, that there'd be this surplus, you know, and I said that means they'd have no family and friends. That'd be very lonely. Christmas, birthdays, family gatherings, and even though people live in low-income housing, I think that the quality of life for them, for instance, the rooftop patios here are wonderful. They are going to be able to use that, but I also think that the developers who provide this type of housing should be looking at the quality of life for them to have visitors. So if I am lucky to be re-elected again, I will be looking for more visitor parking in these types of developments.
Councillor Mena.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question to staff. We heard comments tonight about the Human Rights Commission. I just wanted to know if any of that is true, or if we could end up giving them a call.
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't have the information about that. I'm not an expert in human rights legislation, but since we're reporting back on the financial incentives, we can include some follow-up commentary after we consult our legal counsel. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Madam Chair, I strongly support this motion. Affordable housing is one of the greatest needs we have in this city. In this project, we have a combination of market units and affordable units. In my opinion, this mixed use is the best way to incorporate affordable housing in the city. In terms of the parking, we have to be careful. If we add 1 or 2 new spaces to this site, it endangers the entire project. For the affordable housing, the footprint of the building would have to change. We'd have to get new architectural drawings. We may have to go up a story, which changes the whole construction, because it's 6 stories. Once you go higher, it becomes a different kind of construction. And the reality is there will be visitor parking for everyone. In our building at 175 Hespeler Road, with 35 units, staff required them to have 19 spaces, which was a reduction. And out of the 19, at the moment, only 8 are used, leaving, 11 extra parking spots. And, we have, parking is a problem, but having units, affordable units, is a far greater problem. And people that live in affordable housing basically cannot afford a car. That's why they're in affordable housing. We're on the transit corridor. If we ever get the ION, that's where it's going to be. And right now, we have some of our best transit routes in the city. It's also in walking distance to grocery stores, to the Y for recreation, to Cambridge Centre. It's the ideal space for affordable housing. And I would hate to jeopardize the whole project, all the affordable part, by A, sending this back to staff because timing is an issue and time is money, and having to do a whole new architectural drawings and things over a couple of parking spots, which in reality we do not need. We have visitor parking for both market and in reality, because they won't need the number assigned to them for the affordable. So I would like Council to move forward and pass this motion.
Mayor Craig.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. There was a letter to the editor a number of months ago, I think it was by Brad McEwen. It was a public letter, so I could say that. And he talked about simply saying that nobody really wants to deal with the poor. And he's quite correct in some respects. And, you know, what we have here in terms of affordable housing is concerns the neighborhood, and I understand that. You know, the concerns about property value, safety, discrimination, the police going there all the time. I think that's just fear to some extent. That's all it is. And I think we have to balance these kind of arguments with the fact that people who are in affordable housing are just as good citizens as anybody else, and they certainly deserve to have a better environment to live in some of the cases they are living in. We have 400 families in Cambridge that don't have proper housing, are on the list for affordable housing. And we need to make every effort, and we need to, and I say this in a respectful way, stop the squabbling over little things like parking and so on. I know it's important to some extent, but I think it's been proven in the past it's not the issue. Okay, if people can't park there, they can park in the street somewhere. People come to the market here and it's full, they park in the street. Okay, we don't go out and expand the parking lot all the time. But anyways, you know, I just want us to move ahead on this, and I think with regards to human rights, I think it's not a good argument whatsoever, and I think we'll get a report back to that extent. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. You know, the Satellite Motel has been a landmark in this city for decades. And I'm just happy to see that a facility that has always been used to serve the public is still going to, the land mass is going to be used again to serve the public and to serve those in our community who need housing, whether it be marketable housing or whether it be affordable housing. And affordable housing has been an agenda item for this council ever since we took office 4 years ago. And as Mayor Craig has said, there are 400 families in need of affordable housing in our community, and I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we do everything we can to help out those who need affordable housing. So I look at this and I think what a great mix of affordable housing and market housing all in the same location. And it gives people an opportunity to transition when they get to that point. As has been said earlier, it's on the main transit route, and that gives people the opportunity to move up and down Hespeler Road and beyond and be able to satisfy all the needs that they have socially, whether it be grocery shopping or doctor's appointments or whatever it might be. And again, I think this location is consistent with all the needs in our community, and affordable housing is something that's a priority for all of us, and I'll support this motion wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Councillor Liggett, you have spoken twice. Do you have something new that you want to add?
I made the motion. I only spoke once.
Oops, I just eliminated some people. Sorry about that.
I just want to say I think we're all supporting this motion, Madam Chair. I don't think there's anybody's going to vote against it, but I would hope that Mayor Craig's choice of the word squabbling was because he couldn't find one quick enough. I think we're more opining on the decision that we're making here. So I just wanted to make everybody understand that all of our opinions matter and that we're not squabbling, we're just opining here.
I'm sorry I eliminated somebody. Pardon? It was Frank?
Yeah, but he's on.
Oh, he's on. Okay. Sorry about that, Councillor Montero. You go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's all been said already. We've been talking, we always preach and also use the word preach about affordable housing. If we could have more affordable housing, is an opportunity to have a mixture of affordable housing in. So I'm in full support of this, and I would hate to see lose something like this just because of a couple of parking spots. What's more important? A couple of parking spots or affordable housing? This is ideal, so I'm in full support of the motion.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I do respectfully apologize if, in fact, my words were misinterpreted. I'm not happy about some of the comments tonight, from some of the delegations. I'm really very unhappy about them. And I'm going to leave it at that, because I was going to say a lot more. But again, it comes back to the fact, we have to be more respectful of the poor in this community and deal with it appropriately and to be supportive at all times.
Thank you. Well, we've had quite a round with this issue. I know it's a very difficult issue within our community, and it's an issue that this council has to take seriously, and I know we do. Everyone sitting here is very concerned about providing the housing that we need for our citizens. And the citizens that are out there and don't have housing deserve that housing. And so we have to do whatever we can in order to make that happen. And I feel very, very much so that what's been expressed here tonight is the fact that we do understand that we need affordable housing, and I'm hoping that we will have a unanimous vote that this go forward. We've heard the motion, so I'm now going to ask those in favor.
Recorded vote.
Up, a recorded vote.
It's unanimous, 9-0.
Thank you, everyone. So we will move on to the consent agenda. Councillor Mehta, I believe you have that.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Carroll.
I'm stuck. Are you stuck? Sorry, I got stuck on that. We're just trying to fix the screen, but we can go ahead because I think everyone heard the consent agenda. So those in favor? It's carried. Now we're on to unfinished business. Our unfinished business is the demolition control bylaw repeal. And Councillor Liggett, you have that motion.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Armetta as printed. I have some questions of Elaine Brunshaw.
Please go ahead.
Elaine, this motion has to do with the Heritage Properties Register. So I'm sort of confused on whether we're dealing with properties of interest or properties that are listed. And I ask that question because I see both commentaries in this report. On page 293, it talks about properties of interest rather than designated properties, and yet on page 294, it talks about the official plan and the Heritage Registry. It must meet 2 of the 12 criteria of properties being added to the Heritage Register, but properties of interest don't have to fulfill that obligation, correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, there are 2 categories of properties on the Heritage Register. One is that it has cultural heritage significance, but it hasn't been designated by bylaw. So we call that a property of interest. Then there are ones that have more protections because they meet the policies in the official plan for designation and have an accompanying bylaw passed and registered on the title of properties that then designate them as protected under the Heritage Act for the reasons that are specified in the Statement of Cultural Heritage Significance that staff prepare and that get recognized in the bylaw. So the designation is the ultimate, if you will. Listed is not as protective, but still signifies that a property has cultural heritage interest.
Right, so, but this is supposed to be dealing with properties of interest, correct?
It could deal with both. The purpose for bringing back this report, Madam Chair, is that when the item was presented in July, really the purpose of the report is the demolition control bylaw, which applies anytime someone wants to demolish a house within the City of Cambridge. The Planning Act allows the city to have a demolition control bylaw. When the bylaw was first passed in 2010, we thought that it would provide more of a mechanism to flag which properties could have heritage interest, stop the demolition process so that then there would be time to work with the applicant, the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee, go through steps to see if the property could be listed or designated. But in actual fact, the demolition control bylaw does not do that. So we're saying it's not an effective tool. It takes staff resources to administer it, although we deal with less than 30 applications a year. But there are some cases where there are properties falling into a state of disrepair because property owners are going through a planning application. They want to redevelop the property, but they have to keep that building on the property until they get their future approvals because of the way the demolition control bylaw is worded. So the ultimate objective of the demolition control bylaw is not being met. There are other mechanisms to deal with heritage, and that is by doing the research. The Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee work plan includes putting additional properties onto the register either as listed or designated properties. That's the proper mechanism. There are also some studies that will be forthcoming in the capital budget that Council will have an opportunity to consider that also help flag and identify additional properties with cultural heritage significance. What we find is very important is the property owner consultation, informing the property owner about those cultural heritage aspects, letting them know what the implications of designation or being listed on the register are, and if the property is designated, financial incentives are available. Those are tools outside the demolition control bylaw, and so we still stand by our recommendation, Madam Chair, that the demolition control bylaw should be repealed.
I have further questions, please, Madam Chair. Right now, if a property is of special interest, it just gets put on the list without going through all of that work. But what you're asking for is that not to happen anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what you're asking for. So if we do this, then that means the way this is written, we only get about 4 houses a year where the work will be done by staff, because that's all we have the staff people for. Again, it goes back to, do we have enough staff to do this kind of work, or do we let some of these heritage properties fall through the cracks and just not be on a list? So I wonder whether we're doing the right thing by not allowing properties of interest to keep continuing the way they are. And I also, no, do you want to answer that, and then I'll get on to the property owners?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So the process for including properties on the register does not change at all. But that is a time-consuming process. It takes time for our senior planner heritage to do the evaluation, to write up the documentation, to take a report to the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee, then come to this council, because if there are additions to the register, either as properties of interest or designation, those come to council. That process does not change. But the demolition control review process doesn't stop somebody proposing to demolish if a property is not on the heritage register. And staff can't stop that process by saying, we think your property has cultural heritage interest, we're going to take our time because there are legislated timeframes under the building code. Those still have to be met. So that's why the objective of demolition control bylaw does not work. We're not changing any of the other process in relation to including additional properties on the register, and landowner consultation is a very important part of that, and that also takes time.
So if we're talking about the property owners, when I look at the options, it's written as if, even though we go through the work of doing all of, the assessment, that if the property owner opposes this, like option 3 seems no different than option 2 when it comes to the property owners and their opinions on what we're doing here. So can you explain the difference in the property owners on option 2 and option 3? Because it looks to me that the property owner is the king here, and it doesn't matter what our heritage planner or our MHAC or council thinks.
Madam Chair, the difference between option 2 and 3 for the landowner is no different. The difference is in the amount of staff work that's done up front. So option 2 refers to staff undertaking thorough research, doing a lot of work even before they know whether the property owner is interested. And the idea behind that option, it is a realistic option, but the idea is to present the facts to the property owner about why the property has cultural heritage significance. The third option is not as involved. Quick review of the information we have at hand, then start the discussion. If the property owner is interested, then staff would take the next step to do more detailed research, bring a report to the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee and then Council, because there's the conversation with the property owner and the property owner support. Majority of times, Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee and Council are looking for the property owner concurrence. However, that's not always the case. There have been a few exceptions where a committee and council have put a property onto the register or designated a property contrary to the property owner's requests, but that is not the, that's more the exception than the norm. Thank you.
So between option 2 and option 3 with getting the property owner's approval, I go back to my comment. I don't understand why we would require their approval to do further research if a property is of value. If we consider it of value to begin with under option 2, why would we not just disregard the owner? And I get about property rights, that sort of thing. I'm just, this is strictly the policy part of it. So why would we just not go forward anyway and do that?
Madam Chair, it comes down to an issue of staff resources and wanting to have a high success rate of getting properties onto the register, so the concurrence of the property owner is always a good starting point to then take the next steps and to do the research. And we did that recently with 16 Byng Ave, where there was a request by a third party to designate a property, and we sought council direction in that case about whether you're even interested in pursuing that, rather than staff just spending a lot of time unsure what the outcome would be. So option 3 would result in a higher outcome of being successful in getting more properties on the register.
So there's actually an option
I'm having a little difficulty here. We're having a back and forth, which really isn't the purpose of this meeting tonight. A back and forth. I'm wondering if we should defer this matter until Councillor Liggett can get all of these questions that she has answered. I need to check and make sure that if we defer it to planning meeting in October, would that be a problem?
Yeah.
Ms. Bunshaw, would that be a problem?
We would bring back the same report, so Madam Chair, no, that would be fine. Thank you.
So I'm looking for a motion to defer till October. Yeah. Moved by Councillor Mann, seconded by Councillor Remeta. Any discussion? Those in favor? Motion is carried. And we're going to look at correspondence that we had a lot of it tonight. I'm sure you probably looked at it. Non-jurisdictional items. Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Edshey.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll move by myself, second by Councillor Mann, that the Planning and Development Committee meeting does now adjourn at 8:50 p.m.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
Is it? Oh, sorry, Doug. Thanks, Mike. Chickens and 4 people. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I had this trouble last time.
Yes.
Have a good night, Mike. Yeah.
Sorry.
Chris Denner. He ran regionally last time. Yeah.
Finally, I get that figured out. Dennis.
But I think
Dennis.
they're still in the process where staff are directed to go back and prepare the bylaws.
Oh, you're welcome.
Actually, it's going to council on the 24th. I'm just writing about that before I came tonight.
All right.
So, yeah, it's going to council on the 24th. They passed it, no problems last night. I was talking to the mayor.
I love that. Just this guilty look at his face. Guilty.
What have you been up to, Hardy? Yeah.
In that they want signs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the TV got him first. Yeah. I'll see you, Mike. Yeah.
Putting together an educational kit that you can take before they go, which probably will favor them. And the other thing is sort of they have a level smell that they've come up with, tolerance level for that. So
Okay, check into that.